All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to learn more about GLISA's small grant competition this year. We will go ahead and get started. So my name is Jenna Jorns, and I am the co-director for GLISA at the University of Michigan. I've been with the GLISA team since 2017, and I'm overseeing this year's competition. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Tori Graves-Field, GLISA's Sustained Engagement Specialist, a relatively new position on our team. Tori joined GLISA last October, and she's managing the day-to-day for the competition this year. So you may interact with one or both of us as you consider applying for this year's competition. Today, I will start by introducing GLISA and giving a brief overview of the history of our small grants program. Then Tori's going to walk us through the goals and funding categories for the competition this year and some logistics on how to apply. I'll end with next steps, and we'll use the remaining time for questions. I know we're all probably pretty familiar with Zoom, but for this webinar, we're going to be using the Q&A box for questions. So as you have questions at any time throughout the presentation, please type them into the question box, and then Tori and I will read those aloud at the end of the presentation and respond to them. At that time, you're also welcome to raise your hand, and you can unmute yourself when we call on you to ask a question. And we'll use the chat a couple of times to post some relevant links to take you directly to our website to learn more. And finally, we are recording today's webinar. We will post that on our small grant competition webpage, along with a frequently asked questions document that will note all the questions we get today and the answers, as well as questions and answers that we get offline from other potential applicants. The links for that info will be pasted in the chat today, and we'll also email all of you with the recording and other information. All right, so let's get into it. So next I will introduce GLISA and our small grants program. We do have several new partners joining the call today, so we're going to start from the beginning in case you're not familiar with our network and our program. So GLISA is one of 12 Climate Adaptation Partnership, or CAP teams for short, supported by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. As you can see on this map, each CAP team serves a dedicated geographic region in the United States, and we all broadly work to develop sustained collaborative relationships to help communities in our own regions build lasting and equitable climate resilience. The network was first established in the late 1990s and was known as the Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessments, or RISA program, up until late last year. So during the name transition, we're using CAP/RISA to describe the network. So that makes GLISA the CAP-RISA team for the Great Lakes region. We serve the 8 U.S. states that border a Great Lake, as well as the province of Ontario in Canada. And despite what you see on this map, we do serve a wider geographic area. So if you're located in anywhere in those states or province, we serve you. You don't have to be in the watershed, the Great Lakes watershed, which is what is shown here on this map. The CAP teams are funded on 5-year grant cycles, and we are in year 2 of our 3rd 5-year grant from NOAA. GLISA started in 2010 as a partnership between the University of Michigan and Michigan State University, and that partnership continues today. But in 2021, as part of our newest 5-year award, we were proud to welcome 2 new institutional partners, the College of Menominee Nation and the University of Wisconsin. This infographic on the right highlights some of our work from our most recent award period, 2016 to 2021. And kind of taken as a summary, GLISA broadly works at the boundary between climate science and decision-making, striving to enhance communities' capacity to understand, plan for, and respond to current and future climate impacts in the Great Lakes region. That's a long-winded way of saying climate adaptation. And we advance that mission through applied research and engagement and through collaborative relationships with communities. We work in a number of different sectors, often conducting research alongside engagement on a number of different topics. So one way the GLISA network is unique in this space is that social and physical scientists work together to bring the best available climate science to their regions. And at GLISA in particular, we're pretty well known for our social science work, for developing and implementing our boundary chain model of engagement. And this is a graphic representation of that model shown here, and it allows GLISA to work with other boundary organizations in the Great Lakes. And by boundary organization, we just mean organizations that have relationships with decision makers and individuals in communities that need climate information. So by leveraging that existing trust between other organizations and their individual partners, we can save time and resources to begin to make impact faster, to begin to bridge that gap between all of the existing climate knowledge and climate action that needs to happen at the local and regional level. So our small grant competition is one main mechanism to help us do this. By competing and awarding small grants to regional organizations, they can help us use their existing relationships to address that gap between climate science and decision making. And all of our small grant projects are really a partnership between GLISA and the grantee. So one or more GLISA team members is on all of our small grant project teams, meets regularly with the grantee and the project team, and actively works on the project. And this is a bit different from some more traditional grantor-grantee relationships. So we ran 5 competitions in our first 5 years between 2011 and 2015, awarding 23 small grants. And as we were just getting started, these were kind of more research or technical focused projects and helped us explore how we can engage with partners in our region and develop climate information that we hoped would be more useful. So we started to build relationships and test this model. In our most recent competition in 2019, we awarded 12 projects with a more deliberate focus on engagement and collaboration. And this was in response to an internal evaluation we conducted where we interviewed past grantees and project partners, learning what worked well and what did not work so well. If you want to learn more about that, you can find that internal evaluation on our small grant website, the same page where you can learn more about this year's competition. And this approach allowed us to begin to expand the reach of or scale up our existing services and approaches that we found were working pretty well and resonating with folks in our region at the time. But the structure and goals of the competition have been always meant to evolve and adapt in response to not only the internal learning at GLISA, but changing priorities from our funder, NOAA, and the field of climate adaptation more broadly. It's grown so much just in the years that GLISA has been around. So in this year's competition, we're very focused on supporting NOAA's commitment to Justice 40 at the federal level and beginning to cultivate relationships with and support the priorities of frontline communities in the Great Lakes. So some different ways that we're trying to do that. This time around, we've developed 2 funding categories where all projects need to address justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, or JEDI in some way, or directly benefit frontline communities. And that JEDI acronym we take from our funder NOAA is how they describe those aspects of the work. Second, we've tried to anticipate and reduce barriers to applying for and receiving small grant funding, given the constraints that we do face in re-granting federal funds, and some of those are not flexible, unfortunately. But we're very open to feedback in this area. So if you have ideas, please let us know how we can do better. And finally, we're doing some more deliberate outreach to try and attract new types of applicants to the program who may not have heard of GLISA before or worked with us before. So next, I will turn it over to Tori to introduce the 2023 competition.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna, for the overview. Now let's get into the details of the competition. I know that's some of the information you all are really interested in hearing about. And a lot of this will be in reiteration of the language and details from our calls for letter of intent. And you can fully go check that out as well and kind of see those details in the application process. But we'll cover it here today too. So in 2023, our overarching goal is to fund a suite of collaborative projects that amplify GLISA's impact in the Great Lakes region and address dimensions of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI, as Jenna just mentioned, within adaptation action. We have funding available for at least 6 projects at $30,000 each, and we'll run a second competition with an additional 6 projects, which is tentatively scheduled for sometime next year. We have 2 funding categories for applicants to consider, but overall, all projects must first address an adaptation challenge or topic in the Great Lakes region, and this includes understanding and preparing for current and future impacts of climate change. And the second is to integrate dimensions of JEDI and/or engage and have direct benefits for frontline communities. And I do want to make a note that projects that only address climate mitigation, and that includes mostly projects around carbon emissions and kind of preventing further climate change from happening, those types of projects would not be eligible. But if there is a combination of mitigation and adaptation, we will consider those types of projects. So for the 2 funding categories that applicants can submit ideas to, we have first working with GLISA to improve or expand the reach of our existing tools and engagement approaches, or applicants can propose their own idea to advance frontline community priorities and increase adaptive capacity in these communities. And I'll describe more details on the requirements and categories later, but we encourage folks to take a look at the call for letters of intent to see that additional guidance on how to best meet these goals and categories. As we've done in past competitions, GLISA will continue to maintain a strong partnership model between our team and grantees, again, as Jenna mentioned earlier, and our team will be able to provide time and certain resources in kind to the project efforts, and grantees will help decide what our involvement should look like in a way that best serves the project goals that you all have outlined in your proposals. Our level and type of involvement will also depend on the funding category. So category 1, where you're using our resources, will definitely provide a little bit more support and assistance there to make sure you're all up and ready to use those. And we'll also ask for more detail in the full proposal phase. So don't worry about that part too much either in this first call for letters of intent phase. So I'd also like to share a few quick points of clarification on what GLISA is and is not able to contribute to project efforts. So we are able to provide certain technical assistance, for example, customizing climate information and summarizing historical and future climate data. And we can also support engagement efforts, for example, with workshop planning, presentations, and co-facilitation. However, we are not able to provide new modeling or guarantee sector-specific expertise, such as engineering models, ecosystem assessments, and others. So if folks are interested in tapping into certain expertise on our team, we do encourage you to come to our office hours, and we can kind of discuss if and how we can provide these services to your project. I'd now like to share more details on each of our funding categories. So category 1, again, includes working with GLISA's existing tools and engagement approaches to expand the reach and application of these resources, or to improve the way that we implement these with relevant partners to address dimensions of JEDI. So for these projects, GLISA will provide additional resources and training to make sure teams and users are comfortable interacting with the tools and approaches. We have 5 options available for applicants to explore. We have Floodwise Communities, which is a tool that helps communities complete stormwater vulnerability assessments. CHAMP is a one-stop shop for summarized climate and hazard data that can be integrated into FEMA hazard mitigation plans or other efforts. Scenario planning allows groups to explore a range of potential climate futures and plan for uncertainty. Pivot helps communities plan for potential human in-migration to the Great Lakes region due to climate change. And finally, our frost protection work aims to understand the potential opportunities and challenges of wind technologies for farmers across the region. And of course, this only scratches the surface, and we encourage you to take a closer look at the fact sheets and video tutorials that we've linked to in the call for letters of intent. And now I'd like to share some examples of what projects could look like under this category. So for all cases, grantees should plan to lead recruitment and engagement activities, and that includes follow-up with participants. So proposed projects could consider a range of approaches within these tools and approaches, including expanding these to new partners and audiences, gathering cohorts of users who can learn from each other throughout the process, thinking creatively about engaging different types of partners and integrating other types of knowledges through these tools and approaches, adding follow-up engagement and next steps to existing processes, and providing feedback on existing tools and approaches to find ways to evaluate the efficacy of these resources. And to clarify, simply proposing to bring any one of these existing tools or approaches to a new location or partners would be an acceptable scope of work. However, if you have some other creative ideas or ideas on how we could improve the tools or approaches, we certainly welcome those ideas as well. So for category 2, we're excited to welcome your own ideas outside of GLISA's tools and approaches to think creatively about pushing forward equitable adaptation in the region. And with this category, projects should aim to understand and elevate the knowledge, lived experiences, perspectives, and priorities of frontline communities, really centering them in the work. So when considering frontline communities, it's first and foremost really important to understand that community identity is complex and something that is best defined by communities in their own terms. But for this competition, we understand that folks are going to need some guidance. And so what we mean when we say frontline community, we broadly include communities who experience greater vulnerability to climate change impacts, communities who are also more likely to be adversely affected by those impacts, and most importantly, those who are more susceptible to experiencing disparate impacts because of systemic injustices that have marginalized certain communities. So that's a really important piece to understanding what types of groups we're hoping to serve with this funding. With this in mind, proposed projects in this category could cover a pretty broad range of themes, topics, and geographic scales, while still supporting the competition goals and guidelines. So we encourage you to think creatively and really feel free to propose ideas that fall within those guidelines. But we do want to provide some examples of some topic areas that you could consider, including but not limited to proposing ideas that help assess and better understand what those impacts are and developing plans and solutions to respond to those climate impacts. Folks could convene partners and groups to problem solve and build capacity around climate challenges. You could curate educational opportunities and develop pathways to elevate diverse voices in planning and storytelling. And folks could conduct community-centered research projects, evaluate ongoing actions, or develop new approaches and methods in the climate adaptation space. And again, this list is not exhaustive, and we do welcome applications that reflect these needs outside of this list, as long as they meet the overarching goals of the competition. And I'd now like to move more into the competition logistics. And first, I'll cover our eligibility requirements. So all projects must take place in the Great Lakes region, which for GLISA includes the 8 US states surrounding the Great Lakes region and the province of Ontario and Canada, as Jenna showed in the map earlier. These projects must be led by one or more partners located in the US or Canada and can include community groups, NGOs, academic institutions, local, state, and tribal governments, trade associations, and other not-for-profits or private entities active in the Great Lakes region. And if you're still not on this list and you're not sure if you qualify, feel free to reach out to us and we can confirm. We will accept project ideas from all sectors and encourage interdisciplinary teams and partnerships. Projects that can also have more than one organization or lead as well. And finally, organizations that have received GLISA funding in the past may propose new ideas, but no prior relationship with GLISA is required. As for funding details, awarded funds can be used for team member salaries, organizing and hosting workshops, compensating participants, implementing adaptation solutions, and any travel associated with the project. And if your project will engage directly with individuals whose participation is not part of a paying job, we require that teams budget to compensate these individuals for their time. And in these cases, our GLISA team is able to offer an additional $5,000 on top of the $30,000 to award to ensure that participants are compensated appropriately. And these extra funds will be awarded automatically, so you don't need to worry about applying separately for the $5,000. So for awardees, the small grant funds will be administered as subawards from U of M to the grantee organization, and this will come from federal funds from GLISA's NOAA award. With this in mind, we'll not need to see a formal budget with your LOI, but this will be required later if your project is advanced to the full proposal phase. So at this stage, we're really more interested in knowing the proposed spending categories of your proposal. If you do ultimately plan to submit a letter of intent or LOI, we have some guidelines that you'll need to follow. And these are meant to help us get a big picture look at your project idea and kind of screen what's going to fit best with our competition goals. So when you apply, you'll create an online account with Submittable and complete a series of brief questions that help us know who you are, what funding category you're applying to, and where your project would take place, as well as if you have any history with GLISA, just so we can take stock of where everyone's at. You'll then be prompted to upload a PDF of your 2-page letter of intent, and this should include a few items listed here on the slide, including a project title, description of the composition of your project team, and you'll list the funding category you're applying to. You should also list the total requested amount and outline the proposed spending categories. And for the bulk of the letter, you'll really need to clearly describe the problem or topic that will be addressed by the project and proposed work, approach, and anticipated outcomes. You'll also need to describe the partners that will be engaged in the project and how they will be engaged and impacted by the project activities. And finally, you'll need to briefly describe the proposed role for GLISA and the extent of how involved you want us to be on the project. The competition is broken into 2 phases. So first, we'll accept letters of intent through June 23rd, and our team will evaluate those internally. Then we'll invite select applicants to submit full proposals later this summer. For both phases, we'll be using the online platform called Submittable, which is a free platform for folks to sign up for. And this will help us facilitate application and review processes. So for this current phase, letters of intent will be evaluated against a number of criteria. Applicants should be specific in outlining the problem or topic to be addressed and be clear in their proposed approach. Strong proposals will integrate JEDI principles and approaches throughout the proposal, not just singling them out in a paragraph. We will also be evaluating the engagement approach, and we'll be looking to see if and how impacted individuals or communities will be engaged and elevated throughout the project. Strong proposals will also show us how the proposed work advances climate adaptation more broadly and increases GLISA's impact. And finally, from a higher level, we're also checking to see if the proposed work fits within the funding categories and if the work can be completed within the project timeline and budget. And I will note that in terms of funding categories, if you're unsure which category you should apply to, you can always come to office hours to discuss. And we'll also be flexible if folks need to switch categories in the full proposal phase, if we recommend that a different category is a better fit. So as stated in the calls for letters of intent, there are a few considerations that will really help applicants strongly communicate their ideas to us. And so a big component of these projects revolves around engagement and relationship building. With this in mind, applicants should clearly articulate their experience engaging the partners outlined in the proposal and explain how they will be identified, participate in, and benefit from the project. Applicants should also describe the extent of their relationship with the partners involved. So if it's an existing relationship, we want to know how that can be leveraged. And if it's a new relationship, we want to know why and how it could be successfully developed in a 2-year project. It's important to note that we're not requiring formal commitment or letters of support in the LOI phase, but this will be a requirement if your project is advanced to the full proposal phase. And finally, applicants, again, should clearly articulate how the project will address dimensions of JEDI and really integrate that information throughout the LOI. For those who are awarded funds, projects will begin in the new year in 2024 and will run for 2 years through January 2026. Grantees will be expected to submit short progress reports every 6 to 12 months and participate in quarterly calls with the 2023 grantee cohort. We will also expect grantees to share results and outcomes with their networks and present the work as appropriate. And at the end of the grant period, we'd like to showcase the work that was accomplished. And with that, we will require a final deliverable highlighting project goals, activities, and impacts. And in the past, we've done white papers, which were a little more formal, but we're looking at some other options for this time around as well, which could include impact stories, podcasts, or news articles, which are a little more accessible. After the project period, grantees may be expected to engage with GLISA team members within reason, related to evaluation of the small grants program and climate adaptation more broadly. So for example, this could include a brief follow-up interview, completing a survey, or sharing a brief testimonial on your experience with the program. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Jenna to close us out with some next steps.
Great. Thanks, Tori. So I'm going to wrap up with kind of timeline and what happens next. But first, I invite you all to begin to type any questions that you have into the question box. So we have a few to get us started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so we will continue to offer a virtual office hours for anyone interested in learning more about the competition, asking questions, or discussing ideas. And that is a way for us to offer kind of some feedback and provide some more detail on funding categories and potential scopes of work. So we really encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity, and we can always add more time slots if needed. Letters of intent are due June 23rd by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And as Tori mentioned, that will be through the online submittable platform. It is free to use, but you do need to create an account. So please take a look ahead of the deadline to make sure you can get signed up okay and get access to that site. We will review all letters of intent and notify all applications if you are invited to submit to the next and last stage of the competition, which is submitting a full proposal. And in the past, that's been between 4 and 6 pages long. The call for full proposals will be sent to invited applicants and will allow for at least 4 weeks to develop and submit those final proposals, which will include a detailed budget and justification explaining how funds would be used. Final funding decisions are expected by early October, allowing at least 8 weeks for grant processing, since we know it does take a bit of time to get new subawards set up between the University of Michigan and all of our new grantee partners. So by the end of this week, we will post this webinar recording, these slides, and the first version of our frequently asked questions document on our website at this URL, which Tori is going to put in the chat. We will also email this information to all of you, and we plan to update that FAQ document about once weekly so that folks can see other questions that other potential applicants have asked and gotten feedback on, since we know that folks tend to have the same types of questions. And you can find the link to schedule office hours at the URL that Tori will also post in the chat. So next, we're going to move into the question and answer portion of the webinar. We wanted at least 30 minutes for this, and we were right on time, so that is good. So please type questions into the question box, or you can raise your hand and we'll invite you to unmute yourself when we call on you. We do have a couple in the queue already, so just give us a minute to shift our focus here and we will dig right in. I do want to cover one question that was asked during the presentation. We had a question, and this is for category 1 for scaling up or expanding the reach of GLISA's existing tools and engagement approaches. When we say new locations, does that include locations outside of the Great Lakes? And this references something that Tori said. So for our existing tools and engagement approaches, an acceptable scope of work would just be taking a tool or approach as is in its current form and implementing it with new partners. And we do mean new locations within the Great Lakes region. For example, you could propose taking Floodwise Communities, which is our stormwater vulnerability assessment tool, recruiting, and then implementing that program with a small group of cities in the region. That's just one example. We have another question. Will the small grants be subject to university indirect charges? And the answer is yes, they will be. So whatever your institution's approved indirect rate is, if you have one, we would accept that. And if you don't, we accept a 10% de minimis charge for indirect costs. We have a question on allowable funding categories. So how can you spend the money? So in addition to funding salaries, can an award be used to fund student time, including graduate student tuition remission? Yes, we can certainly fund graduate student time. I will want to double check on the tuition remission for you, since I don't think we've encountered that before. We have certainly funded like hourly appointments for graduate students, but Tori, let's make a note to check on that and follow up with Alex. We have a question. Is it possible to apply for a grant that addresses both goals? Yes, certainly, and we welcome those types of applications. As Tori mentioned, I wouldn't get too hung up on kind of which funding category at this stage. We'd be happy to talk about that with you, but that's part of the feedback we would give in response to the letter of intent of which funding category we think will be most appropriate. We do not have a preset number of projects that we plan to fund in each category, so that's not kind of a strategic decision that you need to be worried about. The cap is $30,000 total for the total 2 years. Correct. So it's $30,000 total across 2 years, not $30,000 per year. That's correct. I think I might have missed a question above.
We have one in the Q&A queue as well.
Oh, great, thank you. Are partnership applications considered re-granting? So I'm going to answer what I think this question is asking, and if I'm wrong, please type in a clarification. So applications are encouraged that involve more than one organization on the applying project team. If you would like to distribute funds between more than one organization, yes, that is allowed. What we would ask is that one organization is the primary applicant that would have the lead individual or principal investigator. We'd have a lead organization that the University of Michigan would make that subaward to. And then that primary grantee could issue additional subawards if you want to. Unfortunately, that would mean that, yes, that would be re-granting. So it would have to go through the indirect rate that's assessed for the primary grantee, and then an indirect rate assessed again for the additional subaward. I know that gets a bit confusing, so we'd be happy to clarify that offline. That is one of the constraints we face with re-granting federal funds, is that's how we have to administer them. Okay, I think I got that one right, at least interpreting your question. All right, a new question for the second funding category. Can the funds be used to improve and expand an existing community initiative, or does it need to be a completely new idea? And Tori, I'll let you respond to this question first.
Perfect. So the answer is either. I think we'll accept proposals that could expand an existing community initiative, or you could propose a new idea to bring folks together. I think in terms of a new initiative or a new idea, we definitely want to hear a little bit more about how that process would be successful in building new relationships within a 2-year period, because we understand that that is a little bit shorter, but it's definitely doable, and we welcome both types of applications.
Thank you, Tori. Yes, we have a request to post the link to the existing suite of tools. So you can find more information about the tool and approach options in the call for letters of intent PDF. There's a page that has a table that has a short paragraph on each of the tools. And then for each option, we have a link to a project page on GLISA's website where you can learn more information, as well as a 5-minute video tutorial. And then in some cases, we have a kind of short 2-pager fact sheet. So we've tried to provide more than one way of learning some more information on our tools and approaches. And if you want even more detail, we'd be happy to give you some more detail in the office hours with us. Great, thank you, Tori. The link directly to the PDF is in the chat. And I believe if you click that and go to page, I think it's page 3, you can find that table. All right, well, I don't see any more questions coming in, but we'll stay on for a couple of minutes to make sure folks have enough time to get their questions out.
I'm just gonna go ahead and put this in for 2.
Is it okay if I unmute and ask a question?
Please
Yes, go
for
ahead.
it.
Thanks so much. That was a very helpful, great way to catch up. I'm wondering if you have a sense of like, if we had a larger project that we wanted this to be contributing to versus like using these funds for a standalone project, if you all have a sense of which might score higher in the review process.
Sure. So if we have seen with some of our past small grant projects that applicants hope to use the small grant funds to support existing initiatives that they either have separate funding for, or to use our small grant funding as a way to compete for and then win additional funding. So we recognize that the funding amount is, pretty minimal. So we do expect very, I think, reasonable scopes of work for what can be accomplished with $30,000. And we certainly do encourage applicants to think about how they could leverage these funds with other funds, either for work that you already have in the pipeline or things you're thinking about applying for. To answer your question, whether that would kind of count in your favor during the review process, I don't, it certainly would not hurt you, but I don't think it would, at least at this time, kind of give any additional weight to being successful. And that's because we do want to encourage kind of new applicants and maybe organizations who haven't had the capacity yet to have much existing work or other awards, but that would certainly be allowed. Tori, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's a reasonable approach. I think we definitely would want to weigh both options.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful. I basically just want to know if there's like a set of projects that we should take off of our list for this, but it sounds like it's definitely worth considering both types.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of new questions. Upon securing the grant, to what extent is GLISA able to advise on projects taking a new non-GLISA formulated approach to community engagement, such as helping plan community-based research, for example? That's a great question. And there are things that GLISA has done and done well. And then there are things that we are learning how to do. And honestly, I think are excited to learn from grantees to learn how to do better. So part of the process as kind of projects start will be some initial meetings. Each new project is you get assigned a GLISA team member who's like your primary partner on our team, and you'll meet with on a regular basis. And part of those intro meetings will be learning some more specifics on, how we can help the grantee and what we can learn from you during the project. For the specific question here, doing kind of engagement within communities, GLISA has done a good amount of work engaging with kind of community officials, kind of municipal practitioners or individuals that work for different levels of government. We have done some engagement in communities, but certainly not as much. So I think I don't want to commit to having expertise that we don't have as much of as I think some of you do, at least that we're hoping you do, or we would learn from you. But this maybe the particulars of what you'd be hoping to get from GLISA could be a good topic for either an offline email or office hours conversation. All right, and we have one more question. Can the funds be used to build partnerships, share knowledge, and build collaborative entities, or is on-the-ground action in support of adaptation the expected outcome? Tori, do you want to take a first response there?
Sure. I'm just going to read that one again. I was moving it into the answered queue. So can funds be used? Again, I think this is kind of the either or category. I think we're excited to see opportunities on different sides. We definitely want to see some sort of outcome at the end. But if these are projects that are still in earlier phases where it's really getting folks together in the same room to kind of talk about these issues, we understand that there may not be as much of a larger tangible action coming out at the end. But I think we will want to know what the impact is, even if it's a little bit less tangible. So I would say both are eligible, but we still want to know what that impact is, even if it's not a on the ground tangible action that is happening. Jenna, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that one.
I think all that I'd add is that the funds can certainly be used to build partnerships, share knowledge, and build collaborative entities. And what we'd like to see is a vision for what the action could lead to. Maybe that's a few years down the line. It's not within the small grant project period. We'd like to see what tangible outcomes there could be later, even if that's not something you think is reasonable within the 2-year project period. Great questions, everyone. They're getting more nuanced as we go, which I think is a good sign that the wheels are turning.
For sure.
So it looks like the questions have slowed down a little bit. So we'll go ahead and formally wrap up on our final slide here. We encourage you to please reach out to us for any questions, or if you have accommodation requests for the application process, please contact Tori and she will kind of triage getting you a response to your question as quickly as we can. We will stay on for a few minutes if anyone has additional questions or would like to talk to us offline. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to learning about your ideas.